So I'm talking about one of my favorite subjects today, which is cars. And I'm just going to say that in the world of automobiles, things are not always as they seem. Now, this is by no means a complete list, but today I bring you 13 cars that are not what you think they are. Now, there's some things that I'm not going to be talking about. It's not a complete list. Back in the day, whenever Chevy sold the Aveo, they also sold it in Canada with a Pontiac nameplate. I can't remember what they called it, but it was just as much garbage having a Pontiac nameplate as it was having the Chevrolet nameplate. It wasn't really a Chevy. It was from Korea from a company called Daewoo. The Ford Aspire was also from Korea, manufactured by Kia Motors. So it's not a complete list, but let's go. So if you notice, there is some slight styling differences between the cars discussed, but basically they're exactly the same thing. They have the same engines, the same transmissions. Everything that matters, the heartbeat of the car, if you will, is the same thing. Number one, the Chevy Nova from the 1980s is the same thing as the Toyota Corolla of the same years. Number two, the Mazda B Series is the same thing as a Ford Ranger. It was really kind of neat how they did the numbering system with the Mazda. For instance, the B2300 was a Ford Ranger with the 2.3 liter four-cylinder engine. The Mazda B3000 was a Ford Ranger with a 3 liter V6, and the Mazda B4000 was a Ford Ranger with the 4 liter V6. Number three. So back in 1989, this new company called Geo came out. Geo was essentially part of Chevrolet, but they were a little bit different. So the first car I mentioned was the 80s Chevrolet Nova. Well, 88 was the last model year that was made, and in 89, with the beginning of Geo, came the Geo Prism, which was also the same thing as the Toyota Corolla. After a while, they dropped the Geo nameplate, and it became the Chevy Prism. Number four, the Pontiac Vibe is actually a Toyota Matrix. So by this point, you may be seeing a trend that if you want to get a quality General Motors vehicle, it's nothing more than a rebadged Toyota. Another fun side note, although they stopped producing the Toyota Matrix, it was the same thing as a Toyota Corolla. And you can still get a modern day Toyota Matrix, but it's going to be called a Toyota Corolla hatchback. Number five. Depending on the year, the Geo Tracker or Chevy Tracker, again, depending on the year, is the same thing as a Suzuki Sidekick or the Suzuki Grand Vitara. Number six. The Volkswagen Rutan was the same thing as the Chrysler RT platform. So in other words, the Chrysler Town & Country, the Dodge Caravan, and now the Chrysler Pacifica. I've actually got a kind of cute story about this. Whenever my ex-wife and I were still married, I was complaining about the fact that I miss driving cars with German engineering. I used to have a BMW that was really, really sweet, and I was telling her that I missed the German engineering in the BMW. Well, a little bit later, she said, what would you think if our next car was a Volkswagen Rutan? I mean, we've basically owned vans the whole time we were married. And I told her that it was a sweet gesture, but it just wouldn't be the same. Number seven, the Geo, or Chevrolet Metro, is the same thing as a Suzuki Swift. Number eight, the Geo Storm was the same thing as the Isuzu Impulse. And honestly, I was really sad when that car went away. Probably the coolest Geo out there, in my opinion.
Number 9. The new Toyota Supra is the same thing as the BMW Z4. Or for any of my Canadian friends out there, Z4.
Number 10. The Toyota Yaris and Scion IA have always been the same thing. Scion used to be a branch off of Toyota,
supposedly for the younger and more hip crowd. However, both the Toyota Yaris and the Scion IA are the same thing as the Mazda 2, manufactured by Mazda. Number 11. The Ford Probe is the same thing as a Mazda MX-6. Now, I read some stuff before that the Probe was supposed to be the replacement for the Mustang. Really glad that didn't happen. But the Probe was still a pretty cool car, in my opinion. My ex-girlfriend owned one. And funny story, whenever she was about to trade it in, she filled up the gas tank the day before. I'm like, babe, it's un-American to trade a car in with a full tank of gas. So we took a drive that went from Cortland, New York to the border of Massachusetts and back. By doing this, we didn't trade it in with a full tank. I also got pulled over at one point during that trip for driving way faster than I should have been. Should have got a ticket, and honestly, I probably should have gone to jail. The police officer asked why we were way out in the middle of nowhere, far away from home, and I explained the situation. The car had a full tank of gas, and it was being traded in the next day. The police officer smiled a little bit and said he would give me a ticket for an expired inspection. I mean, the car had a valid inspection, but getting a ticket for that was better than going to jail for speeding a lot. Number 12. The Dodge Stealth is the same thing as the Mitsubishi 3000 GT. Do you remember back in the 90s when Walker Texas Ranger was on? Of course, Walker drove a Dodge Ram, which, with the Chuck Norris superpowers, never had any transmission problems, which is pretty miraculous. But his partner Trevette had a Dodge Stealth. And number 13, the Eagle Talon and Plymouth Laser were actually Mitsubishi Eclipses. This may not be as uncommonly known as some of the other ones. There are actually car clubs that are dedicated to people with Diamond Star Motorsport cars, aka the Mitsubishi Eclipse, Plymouth Laser, and Eagle Talon. Sadly, they've discontinued the Mitsubishi Eclipse, and then they came out with something that they're calling a Mitsubishi Eclipse, but it's a freaking SUV. It makes me angry. I'm just saying. This is not an Eclipse. If I'm going to get an SUV like this, I'm probably going to go for a Toyota RAV4, a Honda CR-V, or a Ford Escape. First bonus. As I was mentioning when talking about Chuck Norris earlier, Dodges in the 90s were known for atrocious transmissions. They were just absolute garbage. To clarify, I am speaking of automatic transmissions. Starting in 2007, you could choose the option where you could get a transmission made by Aisin, which is in fact owned by Toyota. There were a couple years that the only transmission you could get in a Dodge Ram was an Aisin. Well, apparently Dodge missed the days when they were notorious for having garbage transmissions in their trucks, and all of the new 1500s have transmissions which are made by Fiat and are once again known for being junk. The second bonus has to do with General Motors, specifically their V8 Duramax diesel. This is in fact made in collaboration with Isuzu. The V8 diesels that they put in their trucks before this, which had either 6.2 or 6.5 liter displacement, were made by Detroit Diesel. Well, thank you for watching this video. Who knows, maybe you will never see the world the same after this. Either way, I would love for you to give me a thumbs up, become a subscriber, and share the video with your friends. Until next time, hope your day is awesome.